told that comfort is the highest goal. We build our lives around softness and ease. From plush furniture to predictable routines, we seek a shield against the unpredictable nature of existence. It feels safe, does it not? Like being wrapped in warm blankets on a chill night. Yet, look closely at this sanctuary of cushions. Is this true safety, or merely a deeply cushioned illusion? We mistake inertia for peace. The soft bed promises rest, but deep rest can also lead to profound stagnation. When every need is met immediately, and every discomfort is avoided, we slowly lose the delicate strength of our own spirit. Our mental muscles begin to atrophy, unused and weak. This feeling of effortless ease is seductive because it requires nothing from us. It asks only for acceptance. But accepting things simply because they are comfortable is a surrender. True resilience does not come from perpetual indulgence. It must be earned in the moments we least expect strength, the cold plunge, the difficult conversation, the willingness to face failure when no one is watching. The path of constant comfort leads down a dangerous slope. It convinces us that we do not need to adapt, that our current state of ease is permanent and sufficient forever. But life is fundamentally resistant to permanence. Change is the only universal law. And if we insulate ourselves from minor struggles now, how will we survive the inevitable major upheaval? The Stoics understood this profound paradox, that the things which cause us discomfort are often the very things required for our ultimate freedom. They taught us that pain is not an enemy, it is a teacher. It arrives by necessity, presenting itself as resistance so that we may practice strength. To live always in perfect ease is to build a life without foundation. You cannot build anything lasting upon ground that has never felt the shock of real strain. Consider your own ability to cope when everything falls apart. The job loss, the deep grief, the sudden illness. Will the person accustomed only to soft landings withstand the impact? I suggest they will break. The challenge is not to seek struggle merely for sport or suffering's sake. It is a practical discipline of the soul. We must become proficient in handling small adversities so that when life inevitably presents something massive and overwhelming, we do not crumble instantly. Seneca taught us that the training for hardship should be voluntary, controlled, and manageable. Just as an athlete does not wait for the Olympics to build muscle, we must deliberately introduce tiny amounts of productive stress into our daily lives. These moments of gentle difficulty are mental resistance training. They teach us a quiet form of grit. We begin by recognizing where we have become overly reliant on external comfort to define our sense of security. The cushioned life tells us that happiness is found in minimizing friction and maximizing luxury. But the wisdom of antiquity whispers a different truth. That true contentment arises from self-reliance, from knowing you are capable of weathering what comes. It begins with recognizing that discomfort itself contains valuable information. What does this cold shock reveal about your ability to regulate emotion? Does inconvenience make you angry, or do you find a calm pathway through it? These small tests of temperament are the foundation of character. They prove that your stability is internal, not merely dependent on the quality of your mattress or the predictability of your schedule. This slow drift into comfortable dependence can lead us to undervalue our own innate capacity for endurance. It makes us soft in spirit. The first step toward mastery is admitting that comfort has been a detriment. Recognizing the trap of the perpetually soft bed forces us to ask ourselves, what difficult thing do I need to voluntarily accept today, simply because it will make me stronger tomorrow? This self-interrogation is often deeply unsettling. It requires us to look at our lives and acknowledge areas where we have chosen ease over growth. And embracing that minor friction, the slightly cold water on the skin, the extra mile walked in uncomfortable weather, the painful moment of admitting error before others, that small discomfort becomes a powerful act of self-mastery. It is an affirmation of the spirit's readiness to face reality. This gentle resistance is far more valuable than any luxury padding could ever provide. It is where true freedom resides, not from challenge, but within it. The body is sometimes stubborn in its devotion to ease. It remembers the last moment of warmth and resists the shock of cold, treating it as an assault rather than a challenge. Yet, this instinct for comfort often blinds us to a deeper truth, that true strength does not thrive under predictable ease. The Stoics understood this innate human preference for immediate physical comfort. For them, the body was merely a vehicle, the mind was the battlefield where discipline must be forged. If we allow our minds and bodies to always inhabit a state of artificial luxury, they become brittle. They forget how to flex under pressure. The soft bed trap is real, but so too is the invisible atrophy that comes from refusing minor resistance. Consider the shock of extreme temperature. When plunging hands into icy water, the immediate response is not intellectual. It is visceral panic, a fight to pull away. But here lies the opportunity for mastery. This discomfort is brief, contained, and manageable. It asks nothing more than our willing attention. By enduring this sharp sensory jolt, we are performing a kind of mental resistance training. We are teaching our nervous system that momentary difficulty does not signal danger or collapse. The philosophy suggests that if we can calmly observe the sting of cold water for 30 seconds, we build reserves. We create an emotional and physiological tolerance. This practiced acceptance is not merely surviving hardship. It is choosing how we respond to friction when life itself applies it. It recalibrates our default setting from avoidance to endurance. Epictetus spoke less of the cold water ritual and more of the consistent discipline required. The true lesson lies in recognizing that whatever challenges us, a harsh word, a difficult task, an uncomfortable truth, are all fundamentally small at their core if we approach them with correct understanding. We must learn to distinguish between external suffering and internal response. Suffering is not given by circumstances. It is constructed by our judgment of those circumstances. The initial panic when cold water hits us is pure reaction. It bypasses thought entirely. The goal of such a controlled discomfort, therefore, is to interrupt the cycle of automatic complaint or retreat. We are training ourselves to pause between stimulus and response. That crucial moment of hesitation, that is where our freedom resides. This practice extends far beyond temperature tolerance. When we voluntarily introduce minor, manageable stressors into our routine, like taking a much longer walk than necessary, choosing the slightly harder route, or intentionally doing something slightly out of our comfort zone, we are gently expanding the boundaries of our resilience. We are building mental muscles that have been atrophying because they were never used. If we only ever meet predictable ease, we become unprepared for the unpredictable turbulence of life. When a major crisis arrives, a deep loss, profound failure, or sudden emotional upheaval, our soft systems may fail catastrophically. They snap under the weight of genuine unpredictability. The chill test is simply an analogy for internal preparedness. It teaches us that discomfort itself is not the villain. Refusing to engage with manageable discomfort is the true source of weakness. We are practicing a kind of emotional immune system boost. The minor strain builds the necessary capacity to absorb much larger impacts later, without falling into despair or paralyzing fear. The core task is thus a continuous one: to gently and repeatedly expose ourselves to the edges of our comfort zone, to willingly embrace moments of mild friction. It teaches us that the sting of cold water today can make us steady when confronted by emotional ice tomorrow. It is a deliberate, disciplined choice to cultivate strength through manageable resistance. We speak often of courage and fortitude, thinking that these great virtues are only tested by epic battles or profound loss. We wait for the grand crisis, the moment of visible struggle, believing that preparation must match the scale of tragedy. But perhaps Stoicism teaches us a more subtle, more immediate lesson. True resilience does not require mountains to fall around us. It requires nothing more than the careful handling of small truths. Consider the word itself. The tongue is a muscle far more susceptible to atrophy than the bicep. We are masters of physical discomfort, the cold water, the lack of sleep, the hunger pangs. But when faced with minor intellectual friction, we often falter. The weight we carry sometimes is not literal stone upon our shoulders, but rather the accumulation of unsaid words, of truths politely ignored or difficulties avoided. It is the reluctance to concede error, the shame in admitting that someone else was right, even if you were certain moments before. This reluctance holds a profound cost. To guard our pride, to defend an outdated conviction merely because it was easier than yielding ground costs us more energy and mental calm than any physical ordeal could imagine. The defense of ego is exhausting work, performed in silence, against the self sometimes as much as against others. The Stoics observed this perfectly. They understood that character is not revealed when things are exciting or dangerous. It is carved out during those mundane, irritating moments where we are forced to be thoughtful, vulnerable, and intellectually pliable. We must treat humility not as a weakness, but as the sharpest tool of self-mastery. To admit what you do not know, or that your initial premise was flawed, is an act of radical strength. It requires suspending the seductive narrative we have built around ourselves, the story that says we are always right, always certain, and therefore untouchable. Think of it as mental weights. Every time you speak a difficult truth, every time you apologize for a moment of arrogance, every time you listen until the opposing side has finished arguing, even if you disagree vehemently, that is an exercise in emotional self-containment. It strengthens the inner scaffolding that supports your reasoned judgment. The modern world encourages us to become specialists in conviction over clarity. We prefer loud certainty to quiet reflection. We develop a comfortable insulation around our ideas, and when any small droplet of opposing logic lands upon it, we react with disproportionate force, defending the idea rather than seeking the truth behind it. This pattern is incredibly brittle. The goal is not merely accuracy in conversation. The goal is emotional flexibility. It is cultivating the ability to adjust your mind's landscape without feeling personally attacked or humiliated. You must become comfortable being uncertain. You must learn to thrive in the ambiguity that arises when two intelligent, yet opposing, people engage honestly. The weight of the unsaid word, the truth you withhold for fear of disappointing others or confessing a lapse in your own judgment, is heaviest precisely because it is intangible. It settles upon your spirit like damp mist, clouding clarity and dulling authentic connection. To master this area is to realize that our inner peace depends less on the quality of the argument we win and more on the integrity of the space between what we think and what we actually choose to say or hold in silence. When you practice admitting error in small, low-stakes interactions, when you let go of a petty disagreement with grace, you are not settling for mediocrity. You are forging genuine intellectual freedom. Because ultimate strength lies not in being right all the time, but in always seeking wisdom, even when it is uncomfortable to receive it, and even when it feels difficult to grant it. We have spent so long equating ease with safety. We build our lives around predictable rhythms, comfortable routines that require no decision, little effort, and certainly no intellectual risk. This comfort is seductive. It promises peace and stability. But the greatest deception of routine is that it makes us forget how to adapt. When everything always works out, when challenges are successfully anticipated or buffered by convenience, our inner muscles begin to atrophy. We become soft, pliable only until the moment of genuine strain. We have seen that the siren song of ease is a potent danger. It promises safety, yet delivers only atrophy, a soft rot of the spirit. We learned from Epictetus that the cold shock is necessary, and from others that intellectual humility is sometimes more painful than physical strain. But what happens when these small disciplines become just another routine? When accepting minor discomfort becomes too easy, almost expected? We have explored the seductive warmth of ease and comfort. We saw that while comfort is natural, allowing it to become our sole standard for living creates a kind of spiritual weakness, an atrophy we only realize when things truly get difficult. It is not enough merely to identify the trap. We must understand the mechanism by which this softness diminishes us. The idea we are confronting now is perhaps the most counterintuitive one. That strength itself requires effort, and that emotional fortitude behaves much like a physical muscle. A muscle, if unused, does not remain strong, it weakens. It atrophies. This analogy gives us a powerful framework for understanding our inner lives. Think of your emotional resilience as such an organ. If you only ever experience smooth sailing days filled with predictable success, easy conversation, and uninterrupted pleasure, the deep, stabilizing power within you never gets tested. Your mental sinews become soft, accustomed to the lack of resistance. When a true storm arrives, when life inevitably throws at us a wave too large to manage with mere comfort, we find ourselves unexpectedly brittle, incapable of flexing properly. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that the greatest danger is not necessarily the great adversity itself, but the gradual acceptance of what is merely acceptable. We mistake ease for safety and ease for strength. This subtle substitution is a profound kind of unpreparedness. Seneca spoke about preparing oneself for potential pain, not as an act of morbid speculation, but as preventive maintenance for the soul. The discipline, therefore, is not to seek out suffering for its own sake. That would be destructive folly. Rather, it is about seeking controlled moments of difficulty, minor, manageable frictions, to build up capacity. These are the equivalent of resistance training at the gym, but for the spirit. We must become skilled in voluntary inconvenience. It can be choosing to walk when driving is easier. It might be initiating a difficult conversation, even when exhaustion calls you to silence. Perhaps it is simply enduring an unpleasant feeling, a low-grade anxiety, or persistent, mild discomfort, until the initial shock fades and you realize your inner mechanisms are designed not for avoidance, but for endurance. Each time we choose the slightly harder path, each time we accept a moment of minor struggle without complaint, we send a signal to our deep self. We tell ourselves, I can handle this slight ache. I can endure this difficult truth. I can reset my expectations away from constant pleasure. This accumulation of tiny victories builds what Epictetus might call the robust habit of virtue itself. The inner work here is acknowledging that true comfort is not the absence of struggle. It is the internal state of calm competence, achieved after having faced resistance. It is knowing, fundamentally, that whatever life throws at you, a setback, a misunderstanding, an unexpected change in fortune, you possess the inner tools to meet it, rather than crumble under its weight. The emotional muscle metaphor forces us to redefine good. Goodness does not equate to comfort. It equates to capacity. We must treat our emotions and intellectual flexibility like muscles that require regular, intentional resistance training. If we do nothing, they will waste away. This is a disciplined process of deliberate friction. It requires radical honesty about where we have become too soft. Where are we avoiding discomfort out of fear, not just lack of necessity? When do we let minor annoyances build up into chronic states of resignation or entitlement? The practice begins small. A moment of controlled shivering by stepping outside when you could remain indoors. The voluntary act of asking a question in a difficult meeting, even knowing the answer might be unwelcome. These are not sacrifices. They are investments. They are payments we make to our own future selves, the selves who will face life's inevitable true crises, and whose only defense will be the resilience built today. We have journeyed far from the idealized cushion of constant ease. We learned that comfort is a beautiful trap, one that promises safety but delivers stagnation. If we shield ourselves too carefully from every inconvenience, we risk becoming soft in places we need to be hard. The philosophy teaches us a painful truth. Resilience is not given. It must be practiced. It is built through friction. And often, the hardest training grounds are found not in grand life crises, but in the minor irritations of daily existence. Look at the everyday frustrations that flash before us. Lost keys when we are already late. The slow service at a counter, where time seems to stretch and warp under bureaucratic indifference. The minor technological malfunction that throws off our perfect schedule. These moments often feel disproportionately frustrating. They poke at our nerves, triggering immediate, childish responses, anger, panic, or withdrawal. We want them to vanish. We wish the world would simply accommodate our expectation of frictionless existence. The Stoics teach us a different way to view this irritation. They suggest that these small, daily frictions are not obstacles to be overcome quickly. They are training weights for the soul. Our instinctual reaction, the immediate burst of frustration, is merely a weakness in our mental muscle. It is a quick and easy expenditure of emotional energy that achieves nothing but momentary bitterness. The true mastery lies in what happens in that crucial breathless pause. Think back to the chill test, or the time we had to admit an error. Those were highly controlled experiments designed for maximum impact. But life rarely provides such clean parameters. Here, the challenge is messy. It involves other people, illogical systems, and the sheer inertia of things simply not cooperating with us. This makes it a more complex form of resistance training. The power struggle often occurs in these minor defeats. We fight against the inconvenience because we feel that acknowledging its reality means admitting a lack of control. And in modern life, feeling out of control is deeply unsettling. It threatens our carefully constructed narratives of competence and efficiency. But if we pause, truly pause, when confronted with an illogical delay or a baffling setback, we are giving ourselves the most valuable gift: space. Space between the irritating stimulus and our immediate reaction. This small gap is where freedom resides. It is in that breath, before the sigh of exasperation, that choice is made. We train ourselves to reframe these minor frustrations. The goal is not to eliminate the frustration, for that is impossible in a complex world, but to change our internal relationship with it. We must cease viewing inconvenience as a personal slight or an attack on our patience. Instead, we recognize it for what it truly is: raw material for self-mastery. The discipline required here is one of radical acceptance coupled with gentle investigation. Radical acceptance means acknowledging the reality of the annoying situation without layering onto it our own emotional drama. Investigation means asking questions like, what part of my internal reaction is fueled by expectation rather than necessity? And what can I genuinely change within this system that does not require emotional outburst or withdrawal? Observe the mechanics of patience in action. It is not a passive waiting. It is an active deployment of logic while managing discomfort. When things are moving slowly, when people are unresponsive, our natural tendency is to escalate our tone or mentally check out. The disciplined mind resists this gravity. It treats the slow service or the misplaced item not as evidence of personal failure on the part of others, but as a neutral puzzle requiring sustained calm. This systematic approach to minor irritations builds what the Stoics called virtue, a state of inner order that external chaos cannot disrupt. Every successfully navigated inconvenience is like a single repetition in our spiritual gym. It tells us, I faced this annoyance, and my core equilibrium did not shatter. I found stability even when the environment felt unsteady. This mastery begins to redefine what strength means. Strength is no longer measured by how well we perform under epic pressure, though that practice certainly helps. Rather, it is built upon the foundation of handling the mundane grind. It is showing up each day and treating a minor frustration not as a catastrophic event, but merely as data, a momentary hiccup in the grand machinery of living. The person who can remain calm when lost keys are found hours later than expected, or when technology fails at the most critical moment, has cultivated an inner fortress. That fortress is built brick by careful breath, reinforced by logic, and constantly maintained through the voluntary acceptance of things being difficult, annoying, or simply wrong in a predictable way. These small acts of mental rigor transform us from brittle individuals, easily snapped by circumstance, into people of durable temperament. They learn that true difficulty is not external, but resides solely within the judgment we apply to those minor frustrations. When we master the tiny annoyances, the great challenges seem merely challenging rather than terrifying. We have spent chapters examining the seductive nature of comfort. We saw that physical ease and predictable routine can become invisible prisons for the mind, dulling our capacity to feel challenge or discomfort. But simply pointing out the trap is not enough. We must confront the internal narratives we tell ourselves about our own fragility. This chapter begins with doubt itself, the subtle whisper that suggests this work is too hard, that maybe comfort was necessary. After all, the dialogue we enter now is quiet. It happens in the stillness of a private mind, sitting alone not to rest, but to review. We gather around old mistakes, not for self-flagellation, but for honest, intellectual inventory. Doubt presents itself first as a gentle question. Was this resistance truly necessary? Was my fear of challenge worse than the discomfort itself? These are the thoughts that surface when we try to become robust, the urge to retreat into the cushioned safety of what is easy. We find comfort in accepting our current state of being, and doubt whispers seductively about the perceived cost of change. It suggests that perhaps the strength gained was simply a temporary novelty, something too taxing for genuine, lasting habit. The Stoic path demands radical honesty with this internal opponent. Doubt does not attack us with fire, it attacks us with consensus. It seeks to make us agree that our current level of ease is perfectly sufficient. It tries to rebuild the walls we have so carefully dismantled around our inner selves. To confront doubt is to practice intellectual humility at its deepest level. It means allowing ourselves the space to consider, what if this entire exercise was wrong? Was the pain necessary? Or was it just a self-inflicted ordeal of overcorrection? This questioning feels unsettling because it challenges the core premise that genuine strength must be built through friction. But we learn from the examples of philosophy and history that true wisdom never arrives without cost. The greatest intellectual leaps were preceded by periods of profound doubt, the doubt cast out not as a shield, but as a tool to identify necessary growth points. We must treat doubt not as an enemy to be conquered with force, but as a guide pointing toward deeper understanding. It is the friction against complacency. When we acknowledge the feeling of "I am too comfortable now, maybe I should stop," we are simply noting the natural magnetic pullback to least resistance. This acknowledgement itself is an act of strength. The process involves separating the mere feeling of doubt from the objective truth presented by our experience. The discomfort of having doubts arises because it forces us into active analysis. We are no longer reacting emotionally. We are critically observing the architecture of our own beliefs about ease and necessity. This is mental weightlifting. The goal here is to develop a stable relationship with uncertainty. A robust mind does not claim perfect certainty, nor does it collapse into paralyzing doubt. Instead, it operates in a state of continuous, gentle inquiry. It accepts that the path toward resilience is inherently messy, full of questioning, and requires perpetual vigilance against the siren call of just enough. We revisit the past mistakes with this renewed lens. When we stumble over old arguments or moments of intellectual weakness, we no longer feel shame, which is an emotion rooted in comfort and self-pity. Instead, we observe them purely as data points. We see patterns. The moment I felt secure in my knowledge, the moment was where I became rigid. The dialogue with doubt teaches us that true mastery lies not in never questioning our choices, but in having a consistent mechanism for returning to rational inquiry, even when the emotional impulse is to simply stop trying and rest in what feels safe. It means maintaining an active tension, the beautiful ache of growth, rather than dissolving into the warmth of settled routine. This internal resistance becomes paramount before we move outward. Before we can truly embrace necessary struggles or define genuine strength, we must first pacify the nagging whisper that says it is too much effort. We are training our minds to accept ambiguity as a stable state, understanding that doubt itself is merely a signal, a reminder that we are awake and therefore capable of growth. The quiet confrontation with doubt is perhaps the most difficult discipline of all. Because it demands we question the self who is doing the questioning. We have journeyed through the insidious appeal of comfort. We learned that a life cushioned by ease can become a spiritual trap, dulling our inner reflexes until minor friction feels unbearable. We practiced the shock of cold water and the difficult humility of admitting an error. We discovered that even our predictable routines are merely forms of gentle atrophy, convincing us that stasis is equivalent to stability. To now comes the crucial step. It is not enough simply to recognize the danger of softness. We must actively choose discomfort. This chapter asks for more than just introspection or occasional resilience tests. It demands a commitment, the deliberate choice of effort over ease. True growth, according to Stoic wisdom, never happens in perfect safety. It emerges from the willingness to accept the necessary struggle. This is not suffering for its own sake. It is discipline applied to toward becoming stronger. It means setting aside the immediate gratification that modern life so expertly demands, and choosing instead the path of greater challenge. I must learn how to willingly engage with what resists my natural inclination toward ease. Where comfort whispers, I must listen only to the call of duty and potential strength. I must redefine what success looks like. Is it avoiding pain, or is it mastering the method by which one endures difficulty? The most profound training ground for the soul is therefore the sphere of voluntary effort. If we wait for catastrophe to teach us resilience, we will always arrive unprepared, breaking at the very moment we are meant to be tested. Thus, I must cultivate an interiority where I seek out tasks that challenge my existing boundaries, the meditations that require early rising, the studies that induce intellectual fatigue, or the difficult conversations that demand both vulnerability and firmness. This embrace of struggle is a radical form of self-respect. It tells the world, but more importantly, it tells myself, that I am capable of more than I currently believe. It means viewing difficulty not as an unfortunate accident, but as the raw material needed for character building. I must understand that resistance is not proof of impossibility. It is simply a measurement of my current limitations. I feel the weight of this new discipline settling upon me. It requires forgoing certain pleasures, the instant reply, the effortless habit, the comfortable ignorance. These sacrifices are not punishments, but investments in future selfhood. Every small act of willful difficulty, every moment I choose the arduous path over the smooth one, is building a mental muscle fiber that will sustain me when times truly get hard. To begin this transformation, I must start with commitment. Perhaps it begins with establishing a routine that is noticeably harder than what my previous self would tolerate, a physical regimen in the cool hours before dawn, or committing to mastering a skill whose initial stages are inherently frustrating and resistant to quick wins. These minor sacrifices accumulate, creating an inner rhythm of perseverance. This new discipline becomes my internal compass. I am learning to reframe struggle entirely. It is not merely something that happens to me. It is something I choose to engage with. The challenge itself becomes a collaborator in my education. When frustration arrives, the stubborn key, the confusing passage of text, the sheer exhaustion of sustained effort, I no longer flinch away from it with complaint or surrender. Instead, I pause, breathe deeply, and approach the resistance with cool curiosity, knowing that the act of persistent engagement is itself a victory. Doubt will surely resurface. Doubt whispered in the hours before dawn when my body protests the early rise. Doubt whispering when the intellectual breakthrough feels impossible. These doubts are natural defenses designed to pull me back into the velvet cradle of ease. But now, I treat them differently. I acknowledge their voice. I hear the temptation of comfort. But then I rationally dismiss it. I remember the calculus that today's small sacrifice prevents tomorrow's great collapse. The struggle is necessary because humanity possesses a dangerous capacity for self-deception. We mistake numbness for peace and convenience for contentment. But true wisdom recognizes friction as essential. Life's greatest lessons are never delivered in streams of perfect ease. They arrive like difficult weather, requiring us to tighten our core, adjust our bearings, and trust the resilience built through purposeful stress. This embrace of difficulty is my solemn vow to myself. I will not allow complacency to dictate my worth or define my potential. I understand now that inner freedom is directly proportional to outer discomfort willingly embraced. It is in this continuous act of self-imposed resistance that the quiet, unbreakable strength takes root. The struggle is simply the price paid for a life lived fully and consciously. We have examined the insidious nature of comfort. We learned that the soft bed is a trap, and predictable ease is an enemy to the soul's musculature. From the shocking clarity of cold water to the difficult admission of error, every lesson pointed to one undeniable truth. True resilience is forged not in luxury, but within friction. If strength were merely the absence of pain or difficulty, then humanity would be content with a life of soft cushions and predictable outcomes. Yet our inner selves scream for more. They demand challenge. The final measure, then, must shift entirely from what we avoid to what we actively welcome. The journey has been one of accumulating discomforts, making us accustomed to the minor sting of inconvenience. We have trained ourselves to pause between stimulus and response, remembering that the emotional cost of a moment's anger or stubborn pride often outweighs the practical difficulty of simply admitting fault or altering a course. This discipline is not a series of isolated tests. It is the integration of principle into practice. It means making voluntary discomfort a foundational habit. Consider the magnificent natural world. We are drawn to its sublime edges, the sheer face of a mountain, the unending turmoil of a stormy sea. These places do not apologize for their difficulty. They simply exist in their full, unapologetic strength, and we must learn from them. To live fully, one cannot afford the softness of complacency. The storm is not an exception to our lives. It is the expectation of life itself. The true philosophical definition of inner strength, therefore, is remarkably simple and intensely profound. It is not found in physical immunity or material wealth. Seneca taught us that suffering is merely resistance training for the spirit, a chance to prove how elastic our principles truly are. Strength is the unshakable will that allows you to continue moving forward when every instinct screams for retreat. It is the calm center that remains unmoved when the world around you is convulsing with chaos. This understanding demands a total recalibration of what we consider easy. True ease, we learn, is not superficial comfort. It is the profound inner peace that comes from accepting whatever arrives, good or bad, with rational equanimity. It is knowing that whether today brings unexpected success or minor calamity, your ability to reason and adapt remains intact. The core challenge now is adopting a proactive philosophy of difficulty. This means viewing every potential hardship not as an intolerable tragedy, but as mandatory preparation. Every difficult conversation, every required detour from routine, every early morning commitment, these are not burdens, they are scheduled sessions for building the soul's stamina. We must become masters of our own limitations, recognizing that confronting resistance is the only way to truly understand our capacity. The person who fears difficulty has already given up a portion of their freedom. They have allowed external circumstances, the temperature, the opinions of others, the smooth predictability of a schedule to dictate the shape and depth of their character. The philosopher, by contrast, realizes that they possess sovereignty over their internal landscape. This inner citadel must be defended against the relentless siege of soft expectations. What does it feel like to live with this understanding? It is not always pleasant. Sometimes, meeting a challenge requires a deliberate act of discomfort, such as choosing meaningful struggle over immediate gratification, selecting intellectual depth over comfortable distraction. It feels rigorous, demanding an attention that was previously reserved only for the momentary pleasures. Yet, in that very rigor lies the ultimate freedom. The freedom from fear, the freedom from needing things to be always easy, and therefore, the freedom to live according to principle. The journey to this definition of strength is unending. It does not result in a single peak moment of epiphany. Rather, it is measured by the steady accumulation of small acts of deliberate friction, the cold water shock, the uncomfortable truth spoken aloud, the unpredicted detoured path taken simply because growth demanded it. We stop seeking refuge from difficulty and instead seek out the very process of enduring it. For in that persistent act of showing up for your own challenge, day after difficult day, you finally build a self that is not merely surviving, but truly robust, a fortress against life's inevitable storms.